Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this episode, new rules to make life fairer for pig producers after a torrid few years.
What really became very apparent during this crisis is that a lot of producers either didn't have a written contract, or what they did have was just not fit for purpose.
We'll have more on that a little later in the programme, but we start with the weather. And you probably don't need me to tell you that it's just a bit warm out there. There are health heat alerts out for all of England, where the National Drought Group is also warning that the water shortfall situation is now defined as a nationally significant incident. In Scotland, Fort William and Glasgow are both due to hit 27 Celsius this afternoon. And although temperatures are a little lower in some places, this hot, dry weather is again causing anxiety for farmers. It's not just the immediate impact, it's what happens later in the year when crops just establishing now are harvested in the autumn and winter. Richard Bowers' mixed farm near Stafford has 25 acres of pumpkins that need to be ready to pick at, you guessed, Halloween. I asked how they're getting on.
I'm currently stood right in the middle of our pumpkin patch, actually. So this is a 20-acre field. We've planted over 100,000 pumpkin seeds right at the end of May. It's a really interesting year. I can see pumpkins in front of me the size of footballs, which is quite early, but then I can see some pumpkins the size of golf balls, and I can also see lots of flowers as well, which are being pollinated by the bees. But I'll be honest, the plants do look under stress at the moment. The leaves are a little bit wilted, just due to the heat, unfortunately.
And what do you use these pumpkins for? How important are they to your farm?
Yeah, very, very important. We've been growing pumpkins since 2017 as a diversification to welcome lots of visitors onto the farm. We'll welcome about 25,000 visitors this October. It's a cash-generating part of the business, to be honest.
Yeah, and how should they be looking at the moment? I mean, you were saying that you've got some that are tiny, some that are almost ripe too early.
Experience as farmers, we all know you can't beat the weather and you have to work with the weather. From my experience, we started growing them in 2017. The story was, father, like most family farms, he didn't want me to grow any pumpkins. Finally, he let me grow 2 acres on a very wet part of the field where the wheat had failed, and they did really, really well. We thought, right, 2018, we'll go for this. We planted 5 acres in the middle of the field, the best part of the field. I don't know if you remember, 2018 was a year like this, and all I can remember from 2018, they're all ripe by September. They're almost too ripe, whereas we want them for Halloween, to be honest. The way we combat this, we plant 20 different varieties. We plant them at different stages as well. But again, you can't beat the weather.
They're quite a thirsty crop, aren't they? Where do you get your water from for the farm?
Yes, that's a very good question. We don't actually irrigate these pumpkins yet. It is something we want to work towards, and with this changing climate as well, we are digging a reservoir on the farm at the moment. But one thing we do, we try and rotate them around the farm, and we try and use as many animal manures as fertiliser as possible. But I think part of the issue this year, it was so dry, and we had a bit of what's called a split germination. So the seeds that went into the ground and found that bit of moisture or found those nutrients, they started to grow, and then some other seeds might have just sat in the soil for up to a month basically until the first bit of rain helped them to grow, really. So that's why they're just growing at different stages, really. Another thing that's happened this year is because there wasn't really any rain, you can only use really one chemical right at the start to try and combat against weeds, and usually that chemical actually helps with a bit of rain. It helps to trigger it in the soil, and because there wasn't any rain, that pre-emergent spray hasn't really worked either. So unfortunately my pumpkins do look quite organic at the moment, and I say unfortunately, it isn't unfortunate. Just as farmers, you're quite proud how clean your crops look. I don't think it's going to affect it too much. There's still lots and lots of wildlife out here. We know the partridge love this habitat as well, the English partridge, and maybe the weeds are actually helping to shade the pumpkins due to this extreme heat at the moment. So I'm ever the optimist, and it's not until we get to Halloween that I'll know the full results.
I just thought it was really interesting when you said that you're farmers, you're used to having to deal with the weather. I hope some of your crops performed really well this year.
Harvest has been finished earlier than ever. That's our combinable crops harvest. So yeah, really, really happy about that. We haven't had to dry anything because it's been so dry, so that's saved costs. But yields have been down. We did have quite a bad harvest the year before as well due to the wet winters, and now we've had a bad harvest due to how dry it's been this spring. But that said, we have had some very, very good yields from our spring barley crop this year. That was planted right at the start of spring, just as it just had the moisture at the right time to help it to germinate and grow. And then the sunshine has actually been fantastic for that crop. Again, it's all about trying to spread the risk, really. Yeah, the pumpkins are definitely more lucrative on a good year than spring barley. But yeah, really, really happy with how that spring barley has grown this year.
Richard Bauer from his farm in Staffordshire. Farmers raising livestock inevitably face, at some point, the problem of what to do with fallen stock. That's animals that have died of disease or some other unexplained cause. By law, they can't be buried or burned on the farm. They can't be sent to landfill or left to be eaten by birds. Dealing with fallen stock is a highly regulated activity. The dead animals have to be collected at the farmer's expense by a licensed business without undue delay in order to prevent the risk of disease spreading from residues in the soil, in groundwater or as air pollution. Well, we're talking about how we manage livestock carcasses all this week. So Mary Ward-Lowry has been to a plant in Yorkshire where fallen stock is their stock in trade.
It's a beautiful drive through the rugged landscape northwest of Bradford. This is the Brontes' backyard, just a few miles from their home at Haworth. Tucked away in a crinkle of these windswept moors is a factory that deals with something most of us would prefer not to have in our backyard: Category 1 animal material. That's carcasses that can't be used in any part of the food chain, can't even be used as fertiliser. This is Omega Proteins, part of a suite of companies set up and run by 3 generations of the same family. I'm here to meet the grandson of the founder in his pristine white trainers, Leo Savary.
So we've got various fallen stock collections across the country, 15 to 20,000 farms on our books. So we'll pick them up in small lorries and do local collections. We then take them back to a site where we bulk them up into a large HGV to maximise efficiency for transport, and then we bring them here where the process starts.
So we've got some cattle carcasses on the floor here.
Yep. So they've come from farms. You see they've been tagged on their hooves, so that's why they're over a certain age. We have to do the head test now on them. They come in HGV bulker trucks. Ours have been adapted so they have hydraulic closing lids to try and minimise any odours and spillages, but they are in open trailers. You can't seal them because of it's a decomposing body. It'll gasify if you kept it in a sealed container. We have 2 bins for segregation. We have a hard bin, dead stock, and we have a soft bin, which is SRM, specialised risk material, which we call the gut content from an abattoir.
Right, okay. So that's been sort of extracted from animals?
Yes, it has, yeah. Okay. So that's come from an abattoir where animals have been slaughtered, and then you segregate out the category 3 and category 1 byproducts.
So things like spinal cord and brains?
Yeah, gut content, things like that, yeah. Content. Heads for cattle, things like that. So we will back them in, we'll tip them into large hoppers, and then the process starts. We don't physically touch them, then it's all automated process. So it goes through size reduction, you break it down, you crush it, and then you pump it into a cooker where you use steam production to start heating it up and cooking it.
Leo's taking me now into what he calls the cook room. It's loud and it's hot. There's a lot of stainless steel pipes and hoppers at this factory. It's all unexpectedly Willy Wonka. And while the air outside doesn't exactly smell like chocolate, it really doesn't smell that bad either. To be honest, in here it smells a bit like roast potatoes.
With animal rendering, you're always going to have odours because, that's the nature of the process. We've maximised our odour abatement with oxidisers, with biofilters, all seam welded stainless steel processing, so we try and contain them odours. Next door down here is where we reduce the size of the animals, available to do 20 tonnes an hour each. We've had lions here before, we've had a gorilla, we've even had whales, so a lot of the time when a whale washes up maybe on the beach, they will come to a site like this, and we didn't build our bins big enough to handle a 20-30 foot whale, so it has its challenges. But here, it's got to be dealt with in a reasonable way, and that's what we do.
That report from Mary Ward-Lowry, and we're very pleased to say that Leo Savary's white trainers were still pristine by the end of the tour. We've had some really great emails from you about this series we're running on carcass management, on the delights of eating offal, and we will be reading some of them out in Saturday's programme. So if you would like to get in touch about liver, kidneys or anything else you hear on the programme, you can email us at farming.today@bbc.co.uk. Now, new rules that give pig farmers and producers more fairness in the supply chain come into force today. They follow on from similar regulations around milk contracts that were brought in last year and aim to protect against unfair practices, improve transparency and give farmers more control over how they sell their pigs. The new rules require written, signed contracts with clear terms on pricing, duration, termination and dispute resolution, and were drawn up after extensive consultation with pig farmers, producer groups and the wider pig industry. I asked Lizzie Wilson, who's the Chief Executive of the National Pig Association, why these new regulations are needed.
I don't know if you remember, we suffered a bit of an unprecedented crisis from around 2020 to 2022, 2023, really triggered by a labour shortage in our abattoirs caused by COVID, then Brexit, then COVID again, and then the war in Ukraine, inflation, increase in input prices, and all this had a massive impact on the pig sector. And we ended up losing collectively in excess of around £750 million. And in the process, we had pigs backed up on farm, we had around 60,000 healthy animals culled. And what really became very apparent during this crisis is that a lot of producers either didn't have a contract, a written contract, or what they did have was just not fit for purpose. To be honest, I think it took quite a few people in the pig sector by surprise as well. I think there was a general assumption that most people would have some sort of written contract. And in the end, it very quickly became apparent that because we are quite a small sector and people have been doing business with each other for years and years and years, quite often pigs were bought and sold on a verbal agreement, a handshake. If there was something written, it was generally just sort of an email thread, but there was no actual legal binding contract in many, many different scenarios. And therefore, the producer or the farmer was quite often extremely vulnerable when sort of business as usual was disrupted, really, with some sort of major event, as we saw with the crisis.
And when we look back to that crisis in the pig industry, it was dreadful. Would these new rules prevent another episode like that?
I really hope so. I mean, we've worked really, really hard for quite some time. We've consulted with the sector on numerous occasions, producers and processors and marketing groups, all different points of the supply chain. We've worked with the DEFRA team constantly to ensure that, there is no unintended consequences. And we've tried to cover as much as we can. The regulations probably aren't quite as prescriptive as some producers would hope, but that's really because they've got to be enforceable at the end of the day. And what we needed to provide was a framework for individuals to be able to negotiate. The proof will be in the pudding, but the beauty of these regulations is they are not just now set in stone. They can be amended accordingly if there's highlighted any bad behaviour that continues or the certain parts of it that aren't working or aren't deliverable, as we've seen with the dairy sector in their regulations.
What kind of a difference do you think they'll make to confidence in the sector?
I'd hope it gives them a little more protection. It definitely gives them a legal route with regards to dispute resolution and complaining. There are certain aspects that now have to be agreed in writing, like how the producer is paid, how that price is formulated, how long the contract is, how many pigs per week and the numbers, what happens if one party doesn't meet that. There can be no changes unless it is agreed by both parties in writing. So I would hope that it does provide a little bit more confidence and we will start to see kind of risk and reward more proportionately distributed throughout the supply chain.
That's Lizzie Wilson from the National Pig Association. And that's also all from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Sally Challoner. And Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.